The market is our home. Tenant power, people power, we are not alone. The market is our home. Tenant power, people power, we are not alone. What do we want? No property eviction. When do we want it? Not now, not ever. What do we want? No property eviction. When do we want it? Not now, not ever. What do we want? No property eviction. When do we want it? Not now, not ever. We will not give up the fight. Housing is a human right. We will not give up the fight.
Housing is a human right.
We will not give up the fight.
Housing is a human right.
We will not give up the fight.
Housing is a human right.
All right, make some noise. So I'm going to start by sharing a little bit about why we're here. This month, our neighbor Yehudah did not have a home. His home had been demolished. His landlord had thrown him out under the guise of renovation. He was not provided with notice or another acceptable place to live. He was left to urgently scramble in the hours just before a second COVID lockdown, and he's currently being renovicted. This story is very familiar to us who live in the market and to tenants across the city. In the past 2 weeks, we've seen an explosion of eviction hearings in Toronto, with many tenants' right to justice reduced to just 1-minute Zoom trials. And in some cases, the dignity to speak at their own trial and their human right to housing is being revoked because they couldn't unmute themselves fast enough on Zoom when their name was called. Shame. The Landlord and Tenant Board, which should be an apparatus of landlord accountability and housing rights, instead serves as a rubber stamp to approve landlord interest and capitalist greed. And overwhelmingly, these trials are not in favor of the human right to housing, but rather to the convenience of markets and accumulation. Shame. And when evicted during a pandemic, where does a tenant go? A closed shelter? A full shelter? A glass cage in a gymnasium like the city proposed as a housing solution? Should they shack up with dozens of other vulnerable people and form a petri dish of COVID swapping?
No!
Even putting up a tent and sleeping in the park is not safe from eviction. And we see our houseless neighbors at the Alexandra Park encampment being harassed every day by cops who encourage them to just die and get out of the way. These people want to bulldoze someone's last resort. And last week, I attended an action outside the Landlord and Tenant Board. A group of over 50 working class and immigrant tenants, the East York 50, are being evicted from their homes for being as little as 1 day or $1 late on rent in the middle of a public health pandemic. Tenant unions from across the city at this event shut down Victoria Park and Danforth, much like we're doing here, to draw attention to the unconscionable treatment of tenants during this crisis. And meanwhile, police laughed, mocked, and threatened demonstrators. Shame. But a tenant with the East York 50 says that tenants in their union go at the end of the LTB hearing block. That they get hour-long eviction hearings for their tenants. And why is that? It's because they organized as neighbors. Because they stood outside landlords' houses. They stood in front of the door when police tried to drag their neighbors away. Because the only thing more powerful than institutions is people. We keep us safe. We know that Kensington is a neighborhood that has long been under attack. Landlords want us out. They want us out so they can spike the rent 300%. And to that we say no. They want us out so they can charge $150 a night for an Airbnb. And to that we say they want us out so they can open a multi-million-dollar corporate cannabis dispensary posing as a small business. And to that we say they want to cycle us through as students every 8 months so they can jack the rent with each new lease. And to that we say no. They want us out to develop a luxury condo where a bakery, a community space, a family business, a garden used to be. Our neighbor Yehudah is being illegally renovicted and harassed. And others here here today are facing the same fate. He's not the only one. And I would venture that few of us here have the security to be confident that we won't be next. An eviction moratorium will not solve the problem. It will only create the conditions for another eviction when the moratorium is lifted. Rent relief is the only way, right? Affordable housing is the only way, right? Decommodifying housing is the only way, right? Landlords have to swallow that their housing investment is their gamble, not our responsibility to bail them out while they still have their homes. Developers have to swallow that when they build housing in our neighborhood, we will disrupt every step of the process until it's fair. This work is not about protecting tenants we like or allyship with tenants we understand to be good tenants. It is about housing as a human right. We as tenants and neighbors demand that Yehudah's lawyer rescind her eviction notice for the unlawful eviction of our neighbor, that he be provided with a firm date of when repairs will be done so he can move home. And in the meantime, to receive interim housing that is acceptable to Yehudah, the tenant, not what the landlord deems to be acceptable. We echo the demands of our friends at Encampment Support Network who demand an end to the city's encampment clearings and long-term housing as the only solution to housing crisis. We echo the demands of our friends at Friends of Chinatown and Friends of Kensington Market who say that new housing in our neighborhood must be affordable, that there must be a limit on Airbnbs, that there must be a limit on the corporatization of our neighborhood that pushes out community. As neighbors, it is our duty to protect one another, to care for one another, to secure housing as a human right, to demonstrate the courage and the resilience that the market is so famous for. Give it up for yourselves. We will not give up the fight.
Housing is a human right.
We will not give up the fight.
Housing is a human right.
We will not give up the fight.
Housing is a human right.
We will not give up the fight.
Housing is a human right.
Tell that landlord
We live here.
Tell that landlord
We live here.
Tell that developer